Today, we are living in the land of what ifs and hindsight bias. Was Bobby Okereke walking the biggest blunder of Chris Ballard's career? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hick, your favorite film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. And today I'm joined by my buddy Andrew Moore, who also works over at horseshoehuddle.com. One of my many managers I support. I send my TPS reports to. That's what Andrew's job is there. Collect those from me. But yeah, Andrew's joining me today for kind of a fun episode. I don't know if it might be like a heartbreaking episode, really. Earlier this week, we had Derek Schultz on, and in our final segment, talking with Derek, we look back in the past, what moments from the Colts, from the Indy era Colts would we change? What, hindsight bias, what things would we do differently and stuff like that. And it got me thinking, as someone who's only really been in the market since Chris Ballard came to town, what are those moments in Chris Ballard's era with the Colts? What are those free agent decisions that we would change? What are those trade decisions that the Colts never made, or those draft picks that they never made during his tenure? We're going to use the power of hindsight bias and what if to just change these last, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it's been here since Chris Ballard has come to Indy. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer out there. This is not a I hate Chris Ballard episode by any means whatsoever. Hindsight bias is the greatest tool that's ever existed in this world. So everyone is a genius if you use hindsight bias. So that's what we're going to look like here, using the power of the future, knowing what actually is going to happen. So we're just having fun today. We're going to change, again, some specific moments in the past. We're going to change what Colts would sign or trade and all those things here, and just look at the what ifs of the Chris Ballard era before, obviously, we get the training camp coverage here in the next couple weeks. So kicking it off, I think the number one place to start is specific moments in games during the Chris Ballard era. Now, the Colts are only 1-2 in the playoffs in the Chris Ballard era with the Colts. So it's not a ton of playoff games that you would change. Like, obviously, like I said on the episode with Derek Schultz, you could change like 30 different plays from that Bills playoff game, and the Colts end up winning. So you could pick anything from there. But Andrew, what really sticks out to you as specific moments or things that you would change on the field during the Ballard era that would lead to a different place than where we're at right now?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned that Bills game in 2020 where the Colts had so many opportunities to win that game. Many of them stick out, especially the offsides on Kamoko Toure, the pass from Phillip Rivers that was just outside of the outreached arms of Michael Pittman Jr. there in the end zone, and really if the Colts can beat the Bills, who knows what they can do from there. It's just getting further along in the big dance. So that's obviously probably the biggest one that sticks with you. Another in-game moment, kind of looking at a player specifically, is Shaquille Leonard, and when he suffered that back injury. What if he doesn't suffer that back injury? Shaquille Leonard is probably still on the team. He's probably still a Pro Bowl linebacker at that time, and it's kind of this era's Bob Sanders. I know Bob Sanders was probably a more important player to the Colts defense in the 2000s, but Shaq Leonard was still, there's no denying he was an important player to this defense. He's going to end up probably in the Ring of Honor someday, up there with the best linebackers in franchise history. There's a big what if Shaq Leonard could have stayed healthy. Where would this defense be right now, and where could it be in the future? And then I think one more that really pops into mind for me is just, what if the Colts didn't lose that playoff game in 2018 to Kansas City? Kansas City was obviously the better team. There really wasn't any denying that. But if the Colts play better in that game and are able to upset the Kansas City Chiefs, that was when Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs were really starting to get going. Does that change things if Patrick Mahomes doesn't have such early success? My answer is probably no, because Patrick Mahomes, I'm sure, would find out a way to still be Patrick Mahomes. But how would it change the Colts' history? Does Andrew Luck end up returning and pushing through that injury, knowing that they made it to the AFC Championship game that season, and they're so close on the cusp of a Super Bowl? We'll never know. But I think those specific games, 2 playoff games, and obviously the injury to Shaquille Leonard, I think those are probably the biggest what ifs for the Indianapolis Colts when you consider everything that has happened in the Chris Ballard era.
Yeah, and that's not including obviously the Andrew Luck retirement. Like that's the biggest overarching like player standpoint what if. Like what if Andrew Luck doesn't retire? Where are we right now? Are we still a 1-2 in the playoffs under Chris Ballard? Probably not. We're probably a little bit further, but obviously you can't really do much about that now. I think that you nailed all those big, broad, macro ones there. I'm going to go crazy micro here, Andrew, and I just want to get your just illicit reactions to each of these. And
I love it.
Some of these moments had to happen. Like the first one here, Carson Wentz's overthrow to T.Y. Hilton versus the Raiders. In that week, I want to say it was week 17, right? Was that during the 18-week schedule? Yeah, week 17 to the Raiders. I'm not even talking about the final game against the Jaguars because there was no chance. Like, there's no singular play in that one. The Colts just got blown out in that one. But the Raiders game the week before, overthrowing T.Y. Hilton, I think that would have put them up if he hits that wheel route there. I know, again, I wouldn't change that moment in particular because then we'd be stuck with another year of Carson Wentz the next year. We don't know if that would have got Anthony Richardson. So that's the fickle part of all this. But yeah, that throw was so brutal.
Well, hey, T.Y. Hilton may have been able to come back in a Colts uniform as well. If he's able to catch that, adds another touchdown. The Colts are able to play better in Jacksonville because they're not coming off of a loss. Not necessarily saying that they would win because we know that's mostly unlikely every single season. But is T.Y. Hilton with the Colts in 2022 after that? I think that's something to kind of think about.
Yeah. Now we got some other ones. This one is probably the one that annoyed me more than any other moment in my time covering the Colts since 2018. I believe this was in 2021, so same year. Tyquan Lewis, interception, fumble, plus injury versus the Tennessee Titans. I mean, first off, your heart breaks for Tyquan Lewis. This was the first. I think this was the first of his 2 major injuries. That he had. But just what happened on that play was so stupid. He gets the interception on the tip ball. Great play. He's returning it. He tears his or he has the foot injury. I don't even know if it was torn Achilles. It was something in his foot. Falls down as he's falling, fumbles the ball. Titans pick it up. The next play, the big touchdown to A.J. Brown. Just so infuriating on so many different levels. I would fix Tyquan Lewis's injury in mid-play if I could change anything about that, because oh my gosh, that was just one of the most infuriating moments I've ever seen covering football. I was so annoyed with that.
Tyquan Lewis, I mean, he goes from probably the highlight of his career, catching that interception, to the low light of his career. I think it might have actually been his knee, but it was like an ACL, a PCL, an MCL. The entire knee was just blown to pieces. And then when you think about the fumble, giving it back to the Titans is how it completely changed the game. I was at that game, and the shift in energy in that stadium was from, again, the highest of highs to the lowest of lows so quick. And unfortunately, I've been in Lucas Oil Stadium a couple of times when that has happened as well.
Yeah. And then I got 2 more coming up. We'll just hit these really quick so we can get to our next segment. Obviously, the Browns and Texans games from last year. Tyler Goodson catching the ball, or however you want to change it. Gardner Minshew throwing it a little bit higher, obviously, as part of that. And then obviously that Browns game, I'm tackling that ref before he throws that illegal contact penalty there. Like that one, I think you have to change that one for sure.
Honestly, Zach, when the piece I wrote after that Browns game about how the refs should be held accountable, that may be my most viewed piece in my time at Horseshoe Huddle. I mean, fans were riled up. I was riled up just because, and we don't have a rooting interest in this team. We cover it, and we're trying to cover it as unbiased as possible. But when you see what was going on the field that day, it was really hard to justify that the Browns actually went out there and won that game without help from the officials.
Yeah. And then I got one more game for us here. Just that everything about that dumb 6-0 Jaguars win in 2018. I was looking stuff up for this segment. I completely forgot that game ever existed. That the Colts went for it on 4th down like 6 times in Jaguars territory. Like the Colts outgained them in that game and still lost 6-0. And it was in Jacksonville, of course. I would just kick a couple more. No, I wouldn't kick field goals. I would convert the 4th downs. You guys know me. I can't kick field goals. I would convert the 4th downs if I could change anything, and that would drastically change that entire game because 6-0. Oh my gosh.
Such a weird game, and to imagine an Andrew Luck led team too, 6-0, almost unheard of. So yeah, definitely a very strange game, and I kind of sat there wondering what was I even watching when it was happening live.
Right. Coming up, guys, we're going to switch gears and talk about what free agent or trade things that we would change from the Chris Ballard era. But one thing I did want to say real quick is we didn't even change the biggest comeback in NFL history against the Colts because that was just funny. That was funny. We need to keep that there. But no, we're gonna switch gears and talk about the biggest free agent and trade what ifs in the Chris Ballard era. But first, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And when you guys are hiring for your small business, you want to find the quality professionals who are actually right for the role. And that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It's got the tools to help you find the right professionals for your teams faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals who, you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and that you don't always have the time and resources to actually do the hiring. But LinkedIn is always always finding ways to make the process easier, which is why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedon to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we're back using hindsight bias, what if, and all the crazy things that Chris Ballard did not have available back at the time of making all these decisions. So again, not criticizing him too much for this. I mean, some of these are ones at the time we criticized, obviously. But Andrew, when we're looking at what Chris Ballard could have done differently in the free agent market, the trade market during his tenure with the Colts, and using that hindsight bias to really change things, you probably start at the quarterback position, right? Since post Andrew Luck, I feel like there were a couple of opportunities there that the Colts could have done something better than what they did do. I think for me, the first thing that pops up is the Carson Wentz trade. Inarguably the biggest prevalent blunder in the Chris Ballard era was making that trade of a first and third round pick for Carson Wentz. It only lasted 1 year. They ended up dealing him for pennies on the dollar, considering what they gave up for him. And it led to, it ultimately led to the Frank Reich firing a year later. I think changing that in any way is probably the way to go if we're really using the hindsight bias on this one.
Yeah, I would agree, and everyone had such high hopes for Carson Wentz at the time, myself included, because I thought, if Carson Wentz can turn his career around, the best place for it to happen is in Indy with Frank Reich, a guy that he trusts, that got the best out of Carson Wentz in his time in Philadelphia. And unfortunately, there were points in 2021 where you thought, okay, there's some flashes here, but he could never put it together. And then by the end of the 2021 season, you are winning in spite of Carson Wentz at times, not because of Carson Wentz. And really, it was Jonathan Taylor carrying this entire offense on his shoulders to end that season. And then obviously you got to talk about what happened with Matt Ryan. I think that was the final desperate attempt by the Colts to get a veteran quarterback in here. And I also think it was probably Chris Ballard and Frank Reich not being totally honest with themselves about where this roster was. And Matt Ryan, it was just at that point where he completely fell off a cliff. So because the Colts weren't honest about, they kept thinking that we're one piece away, we're a quarterback away, when it turns out this team over these last 2 seasons has gone through it's not a full-fledged rebuild where you're tearing it completely down to the studs. I mean, there's been a lot of turnover with this team, getting some of the older era out, bringing in a bunch of new players, deciding who to keep, who not to keep, and then just starting at ground zero with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. So you hope that can continue, and the Colts can continue to make strides in that way.
Yeah. And I think when we're talking about the quarterback thing, I don't want to spend too much time on this one because there's plenty of other ones that we can jokingly go over. But do you again, looking back, using revisionist history on this, do you think if you were in charge and knowing what you know now, would you push harder for a trade for Matthew Stafford, or would you push harder to sign Tom Brady? I think, those are two. I mean, maybe not the Tom Brady one, just because we have to have some kind of hatred in our hearts. We can't, we can't fully change like that. But the Matthew Stafford one, I think, especially when you consider the Colts did have some interest, like that's and that was the same offseason as the Carson Wentz trade. Mm-hmm. So at least with Tom Brady, you got Phillip Rivers in here that year, where Phillip Rivers had a good season. And again, if we're changing everything, we're winning that Bills playoff game. We're running all the way to the Super Bowl. But with the Stafford one, it's like Wentz or Stafford, maybe you're giving up 2 firsts or 3 firsts, whatever it is. But like, maybe that would have worked. You never know.
Exactly. And that was actually going to be my answer to this question is the Stafford trade, because instead of Matthew Stafford, you get Carson Wentz. We all know what happened there, but Matthew Stafford goes out to LA, still enjoys a kind of a resurgence with his career, goes out there, and the Los Angeles Rams have a Super Bowl. The Colts do not. And Matthew Stafford, while he's been battling through some injuries, when healthy, he's still a top 10 quarterback easily. So Matthew Stafford, that trade where the Colts were, I think we heard at the time that the Colts were interested, but they didn't want to go as far as the Rams did, go as all in as the Rams did. And it turns out the Rams made the right decision. They went all in, and while it did cost them a lot, they got the Super Bowl, so it was worth it.
Yeah. And going away from quarterback now, we could obviously talk about all these different trades that other teams made, go get the Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick.
That was my other one.
Yeah. Like all these ones, obviously. And those are plenty worth talking about for sure. Why not go sign Trey Hendrickson if we know what we know now, and all these other things? Or even if you want to go as recent as this most recent off season, sign Xavier McKinney instead of the Packers or something, give him $25 million a year, whatever you need to do to make sure that happens. We could do that for so many things, but keeping it in-house, I think letting Danico Autry walk and letting Bobby Okereke walk are the two biggest things. Like, I know the Bobby Okereke thing goes hand in hand with Shaquille Leonard's injury, so you kind of have to pick, if we're doing this revisionist history thing, you got to change some certain things with, them giving Leonard that extension and picking him over Okereke, but like, I think that the Okereke one in particular is really where this power of revisionist history and hindsight bias really comes in, because like that's the one that we would all really change. Like that's a realistic move where if we just knew a little bit of what was going to happen, we do the other thing, and we have we have Zaire Franklin who's playing lights out. We have Bobby Okereke out the will, who's very, very good player. EJ Speed coming off the bench. That's very strong instead of just Speed and Franklin. And, Shaquille Leonard's basically out of the league at this point. So I think the Okereke one's a very frustrating one, because that one realistically could have gone the other way. Like, you don't doubt the Colts for what they did, but like one of our homegrown talents is really, really good for another team. Like that doesn't happen with Chris Ballard. And that's the one time he let one get away because he chose wrong. chose wrong. And I think if you could really change anything, like that's the biggest like in-house mistake in a way that you would change.
And as soon as Bobby Okereke goes to a big market like New York, I mean, there's respect now put on his name. And I think a lot of people are consider Bobby Okereke a borderline a top 10 off-ball linebacker in the NFL. He certainly had a fantastic season for the Giants last year, and I think he can even continue to improve on that. Us that follow the Colts knew how good Bobby Okereke was, and I think the Colts did as well. But at that point, you can't pay two off-ball linebackers and expect to be competitive in the NFL. And the Colts at that time, I think they still believed that Shaquille Leonard could overcome that injury, and obviously they were wrong on that one.
Yeah, it's just not much they could have done there. Like once they committed all those resources to Leonard, you had to ride it out until you saw what was going to happen. And then, they had Franklin and Speed on manageable contracts. Like that's a fine linebacker group if Leonard's healthy, but Leonard just didn't stay healthy. Okereke walks. Okereke becomes this, not becomes, he really always just was this top 10-ish linebacker. And that happened. So, again, I don't blame Chris Ballard too much for that one. I don't really blame anyone for that. It's just unfortunate what happened. But yeah, losing Okereke, I think it's like the biggest blunder in-house that Ballard made. And I don't necessarily call it like a blunder in that sense, but we're going to move past this, guys. We're going to move to the draft. Obviously quarterback's going to be a conversation there as well. But what are the biggest what ifs in the Colts recent draft history under Chris Ballard? But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, guys, I know it's hard out there with social media, hard to look at all these people with great lives and just so much wealth and buying houses and having 30 kids and all this and just wanting to compare yourself to what they're doing. And the social media has really opened this up to a lot of people. I've grown up in the social media era. You can just look at what everyone's doing that's better than you, but look, social media is not everything. It's not the whole world. In comparison, it's the thief of joy. It's easy to envy other people's lives, but something like therapy can really help you get to a better place mentally to where you're not comparing yourself to what other people are doing. If you guys are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I have personally gone to therapy multiple times in my life. It has been an ultimate crutch for me just to figure out where I need to be in the right headspace and ultimately come to grips with loving myself and figuring out who I am as a person. Now I'm at the point where I don't compare myself to other people, or I don't take criticism on social media too harsh or anything like that. It takes a lot of work, and BetterHelp is one way that you can get there. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Andrew Moore, my buddy over at horseshoehuddle.com. He is joining us today to talk all about using hindsight bias and revisionist history to change everything that's happened the last couple of years. Again, Chris Ballard has done a great job. We're not here to criticize him with this. It's just, at the end of the day, revisionist history, you're a genius if you can use this. And before we get to the quarterback stuff, because obviously if you know what you know now, you probably trade Andrew Luck in 2017, 2018, take Pat Mahomes or take Josh Allen, and then you're feeling good. Or you do something crazy to go get Justin Herbert in 2020. You don't trade for Buckner, you go up for Herbert. Like, obviously, those are the big ones at quarterback. But aside from that, I think the biggest one that I will never get over for as long as I live, Chris Ballard, if you're listening, I will never get over this one. Paris Campbell over Terry McLaurin. That one hurts so bad. And look, again, if we know what we know now, it's much worse than what it was at the time. Because even like at the time, Campbell was the more productive player, elite athletic profile. The head coach was pounding the table for him, and you just could never project the injuries. Even at the time, I was fine with it. But even then, I had Terry McLaurin much higher than Paris Campbell. Like, and the fact that he was born in Indy, he had the greatest offseason you could ever ask for. He wanted to come to Indy. He had the special teams, the Senior Bowl, the captaincy, like every single thing that checked every single box for the Colts. And it just didn't happen. And I'm still kind of wondering why it didn't, because it's like, as someone who does the Build-A-Ballard stuff, it's like, Chris, this was the guy. This was the guy. Like, how is Terry McLaurin not still a Colt? How is he not one of the highest paid receivers in football as a Colt? And you know, we're chilling right now. But yeah, I think that's ultimately the biggest draft what if, besides quarterback stuff, knowing, you know, with Andrew Luck and all that, is like, how did Terry McLaurin not end up in a Colts jersey back in 2019?
That 2019 draft is honestly full of what ifs, because you think the Colts even traded back out of the first round instead of sticking pat and taking Montez Sweat, who I think the Commanders took. Either it was at that pick or a pick after that, Montez Sweat, but instead they trade back and take Rock Ya-Sin. AJ Brown was still on the board, obviously, and then Paris Campbell with DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin still on the board. So there's a lot of what ifs in those first two rounds. Ben Banogu was also taken in 2019. Bobby Okereke, who we just talked about, which was the guy that actually turned out to be the best out of the bunch. So yeah, that 2019 is filled with what ifs, that 2019 draft, and the Colts are on the wrong end on pretty much all of them.
Yeah. The other like really big what if, and then I'll throw it over to you here, Andrew. But like, again, another one that just made so much sense at the time, and I have no clue how it didn't happen. How did Tariq Woolen fall so far in the draft? Tariq Woolen in the 2022 draft fell all the way to what, round 5? And it's like, Ballard, you love the super athletes. You love these corners who are like 6'4", like 400-inch arms, who run 4.1. Like that. This is what Woolen was made in my creative player, you know, Madden leagues that I'm playing. Basically, this was a fake player. It doesn't matter how good he was on the football field in college. Oh, by the way, he was pretty good in college too. Like former wide receiver too, that fit the position change thing. I have no clue. Like I know it's crazy to ask him about this now because it's so far removed and this guy hasn't been on the Colts, but like how did this not happen? Like, this is your guy. You took Darius Rush a year later. This is like, Darius Rush is the worst version of this. Like, I don't know what happened here.
You can tell that pick is still hurting you to this day. You are pounding the table for Tariq Woolen.
He took Marvell Tell in the 2019 draft a couple years early. Like, he's taken so many versions of this exact same project, and every time it fails, I'm like, you know what? You keep taking shots at that project. Like,
yep.
When it works, it works. And Tariq Woolen was the one that worked, and he's not with the Colts. It's like, how did that one not? Like that.
Yeah, it's that one was one that I thought Woolen was a lock to the Colts in 2022, and obviously each round goes by and you just don't see him picked until Seattle gets him, and now look, he looks like he's going to be a starter for them for a very long time.
Yeah. No, I was projecting him top 50 to the Colts. Oh man, what are some that come to mind for you? I mean, again, obviously, you take Josh Allen in 2018. If we're really doing this, like, you take Josh Allen in 2018. But what are some ones that come to mind for you, Andrew?
So I'm going to go to 2017. And I know Chris Ballard came on late, so it wasn't his scouting staff or anything like that. But the Colts end up taking Malik Hooker at 15, which a lot of people at the time thought Hooker was a top 10 pick. So you think, oh, he was able to fall to 15. The Colts got great value for that. Only thing is, TJ Watt went in the first round at pick number 30 in that draft. And for Chris Ballard not being able to get a dominant pass rusher, and for something that he's wanted since he took the GM job, he's always about building on the lines, O-line and D-line. TJ Watt was staring him right in the face, and the Colts passed by him. And who knows, maybe Latu turns into that dominant pass rusher, but could you imagine Watt on one side and Latu on the other? If he does, that would be this generation's Freeney and Mathis. So that one hurts. Another one was in 2021, and I know I don't want to talk down on this man because I know this is a pro Dio Dangbo podcast, but if the Colts would have known what Amon-Ra St. Brown could have been in 2021, you probably take Kwity Paye in round 1. Maybe you take Christian Darrisaw, but that's another one that you could argue. But instead of Dio Dangbo in round 2 and going back-to-back pass rushers, well, you wouldn't need it because you already have TJ Watt, but then you add Amon-Ra St. Brown there, a fantastic route runner. I think he would pair very, very well with what the Colts have at wide receiver with Michael Pittman, with Alec Pierce. Who knows if Josh Downs is even on the roster at this point if you have St. Brown in there in the slot. But as we all know now, St. Brown is, I think, the third highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, and he's a perennial Pro Bowler. He's a fantastic talent. So those are, again, just a couple of the what ifs to go along with what you had said earlier, especially in that 2019 draft.
Yep. And if you guys are following here, listening to this show, as of right now, we fixed Andrew Luck's calf. We also drafted Josh Allen. We took TJ Watt. We traded for Matthew Stafford. We did all these things to fix the Indianapolis Colts. But look, at the end of the day, training camp is coming up. We're excited about Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Shane Steichen at the helm, a really fun pass rush on the other side. Like, this doesn't take away from where we're at when it comes to the current Colts. Obviously, it always hurts to look back a little bit and think about what you could change. I mean, if you want to listen to the Derek Schultz episode where he talked about the shoelace tackle against the Steelers in 2005, where that was the easiest Super Bowl the Colts could have ever won if they just runs a little bit to the other side of the field instead of running straight at Ben Roethlisberger's hand or whatever. Instead, we're talking about another championship. But I digress, guys. We're talking about the future now after this episode. We're going to have a little fun looking back, obviously. But let us know in the comment section, what is your biggest what if or thing you would change in the Chris Ballard era? And I'll hold you guys to a higher standard than what we held ourselves to. Make it something that at the time, if we're talking free agent move, trade, draft, at the time you were pounding the table for, and just proclaim how right you were at the time. Like me with Terry McLaurin here on this episode. You just yell at us in the comment section about how right you were about this and that. You were always against the Carson Wentz trade. You knew Matt Ryan wasn't going to work out. We should have gone and got Tom Brady. Let us know in the comment section below this video. And before we get out of here, I do want to remind you guys that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available in the Amazon Fire TV app and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. If you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Andrew Moore NFL for all your off-season coverage. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here early next week.